The chemistry lab smelled like fear that morning, not the sharp bite of sulfuric acid or the metallic tang of copper sulfate, but something far more corrosive. Riley Caldwell would later realize it was the scent of her own naivety, burning away. She stood at the front of the room, watching her AP chemistry students file in for what should have been another Tuesday morning double period. December frost painted the windows, and the radiators clanked their familiar rhythm. Everything looked normal. Everything except the way Madison Chen wouldn't meet her eyes. How Ethan Rodriguez kept glancing at the door, and how the usual pre-class chatter had been replaced by a silence so thick you could pour it into a beaker and measure its density. 29 years old, 5'4", with auburn hair she kept in a perpetual ponytail. Riley had traded her FBI forensics lab for this classroom 5 months ago. Her therapist had called it seeking redemption through education. Her mother had called it running away. Riley had called it necessary. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. The door swung open at 8:17. Not slammed. Hunter Sinclair never slammed doors. He controlled space with the same precision his father controlled pharmaceutical patents and political donations. 6'2", crystalline blue eyes. The kind of symmetrical features that would have been beautiful if beauty didn't require a soul behind it. His Patagonia jacket probably cost more than Riley's monthly car payment. "Morning, Miss Caldwell." His voice carried that particular frequency of wealth, not loud, never needing to be loud when money had already done all the shouting for you. "Mr. Sinclair, you're late. Am I?" He glanced at the industrial clock above the periodic table. Time's such a relative concept, isn't it, like truth or consequences? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Madison Chen's pencil rolled off her desk, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. Nobody moved to pick it up. Riley had learned to read danger in her previous life, in the field. It came with drawn weapons and shouted warnings. In high school, it wore designer clothes and spoke in riddles. "Take your seat, Hunter. We're starting the lab on reaction kinetics." "Oh, I think we'll be studying reactions today." He smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd never been told no in any way that mattered. Just not the kind you planned. That should have been her first warning. But Riley Caldwell, who'd once identified the chemical composition of explosives that saved 17 lives, who'd testified in cases that put killers away for life, somehow missed the bomb ticking in her own classroom 3 weeks earlier. She'd noticed discrepancies in the chemical inventory. Nothing dramatic, a few grams of pseudoephedrine here, some phenylacetic acid there. Chemicals that, in isolation, meant nothing. Together, they painted a very different picture. She'd stayed late that November night, cross-referencing purchase orders with stock levels. The numbers didn't lie, even when everything else at Ridgemont Academy seemed built on careful deceptions. Someone was stealing controlled substances, someone with access to the restricted storage area. The security footage had been almost too easy to obtain. Brady, the night security guard, was a Desert Storm vet who appreciated her direct approach and shared her suspicion that Ridgemont's gilded halls hid something rotten. "You didn't see this from me," he'd said, sliding her the USB drive. "But I got grandkids. You know, don't like the idea of what some of these rich punks might be cooking up." At 2:43 a.m. on November 15th, the camera had captured Hunter Sinclair entering the chemistry storage room with a master key, the same key his father had been given after donating the new Milton Sinclair laboratory wing. He'd emerged 17 minutes later with a backpack that sat significantly lower on his shoulders. But catching a senator's son, sorry. The son of the man who owned the senator's stealing chemicals was like catching rain in a sieve. You needed more than video. You needed to know why. Earth to Miss C. Hunter's voice pulled her back to the present. He'd taken his usual seat in the back row, flanked by his crew. Mason Whitmore to his left, old railroad money so established they'd probably charged the Native Americans rent. Chloe Vandenberg to his right, her mother anchored the 6 o'clock news and had perfected the art of making tragedy photogenic. Behind them, the Brennan twins, whose father's law firm had turned defending the indefensible into an art form. Today, we're examining how temperature affects reaction rates, Riley began, forcing her voice steady. Can anyone tell me why increasing temperature typically speeds up a chemical reaction? Silence, not the silence of ignorance. Her AP students knew this material cold. This was the silence of a courtroom before a verdict. Come on, she tried again. This was in last night's reading. Collision theory. Zoe Nguyen's hand started to rise, then dropped. The girl who'd never met a question she couldn't answer was staring at her desk like it held the secrets of the universe. Well, Hunter's voice sliced through the room. Heat makes molecules move faster. They collide more frequently. More collisions mean more reactions. He paused, letting each word settle like sediment. Kind of like people. Wouldn't you say, apply enough heat, enough pressure, and eventually... He snapped his fingers. Something's got to give. The lab instructions were already distributed. Materials set out at each station. Riley had planned this practical for weeks, watching how different temperatures affected the rate of sodium thiosulfate reacting with hydrochloric acid. Safe, controlled, educational. She moved between the lab benches, checking setups, adjusting hot plates, pretending her hands weren't trembling slightly. At Zoe's station, she paused. The girl looked pale, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. You okay? Riley asked quietly. Zoe nodded quickly. Too quickly. Just tired. Big history test yesterday. But Riley caught the way Zoe's hand shook as she measured the sodium thiosulfate. She'd seen those tremors before, in a very different context. The body processing chemicals it wasn't meant to handle. If you need to see the nurse, I'm fine. The words came out sharp, desperate. Then, softer. Please, Miss C, I'm fine. Riley wanted to press, but Mason Whitmore had just knocked over a beaker accidentally. Of course, sending glass shards across the floor. By the time she'd supervised the cleanup, made sure no one was cut, and replaced the equipment. The moment had passed. The rest of the lab proceeded with the kind of smooth efficiency that made her skin crawl. Every measurement perfect. Every observation recorded. Every student playing their assigned role in whatever performance she'd walked into. As they cleaned up, Hunter approached her desk. Up close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive that probably had a French name she couldn't pronounce. But underneath it, faintly, the acrid scent of burnt chemicals. Interesting lab, Miss Caldwell. He set his data sheet on her desk. Every calculation perfect, naturally. You know what I find fascinating about chemistry? She didn't answer, didn't trust her voice. It's all about bonds. He leaned against her desk, casual, proprietary. Ionic, covalent, metallic. But here's the thing, every bond has a breaking point. Apply the right catalyst, the right conditions, and even the strongest connections just— He made a pulling motion with his hands. Fall apart. Is there something you want to say to me? Hunter, me, no. That smile again, sharp as broken glass. Just appreciating the lesson. Chemistry's everywhere. After all, in our food, our medicine, our recreational activities. If you're referring to the Winter Formal Committee is planning something special, he interrupted smoothly. Molecular gastronomy theme, you know, using science to create new experiences. Push boundaries. Speaking of which, how's your sister? The question hit like ice water. Riley's hand stilled on the papers she'd been organizing. I don't have a sister. Really? That's strange. Hunter pulled out his phone, swiped once, twice. Because you look just like her. He turned the screen toward her. A photograph. Grainy but unmistakable. Sarah, 5 years younger. Laughing at someone off camera. Wearing the Columbia University sweatshirt Riley had given her for her 18th birthday. The last photo taken before— Where did you get this? Public records are so accessible these days. He pocketed the phone. Sarah Caldwell, 23, biochemistry major, honors student, until she wasn't. He tisked softly. Fentanyl's a hell of a drug, but you'd know all about that, wouldn't you, being ex-FBI and all? The room spun slightly. She gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. Oh, you thought that was a secret. Hunter's laugh was soft, genuinely amused. Miss C, nothing's a secret if you know where to look, or who to pay to look for you. Get out. I'm going. He picked up his backpack, slung it over one shoulder. But first, a friendly warning. You seem like a nice person. Misguided. Maybe. Dealing with some obvious trauma. So I'll be clear, stop digging. Stop asking questions. Stop pretending you're going to save anyone. He leaned in close, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Your sister couldn't be saved. Neither can anyone else. And if you keep trying to play hero, well, he straightened, normal volume returning. Chemistry can be dangerous. Accidents happen all the time in labs, even to teachers. He was at the door when Riley found her voice. Hunter, he paused, glanced back. You're right about bonds having breaking points, she said, but you forgot something from the reading. Some reactions are reversible. Push too hard in one direction, and the system pushes back. It's called Le Chatelier's principle. Is that a threat? Miss Caldwell? It's chemistry. Mr. Sinclair, just chemistry. After he left. Riley sank into her chair, Sarah's photo burning behind her eyelids. She'd thought she could leave it all behind the death. The guilt. The knowledge that she'd been tracking the very dealers who'd sold Sarah the dose that killed her. She'd been 2 days away from the bust when the call came. 2 days. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You look tired. Take a sick day tomorrow. A friend. She deleted it, then thought better and took a screenshot first. Evidence. Always preserve evidence. The next morning, she didn't take a sick day. She arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, determined to maintain normalcy while she figured out her next move. The hallways were still empty, her footsteps echoing in the pre-dawn quiet. Her classroom door was already open. Every instinct from her previous life screamed danger. She approached carefully, phone ready to dial 911, but the room was empty, seemingly untouched. Except on her desk, where she'd left a stack of graded tests, sat a small glass vial. Clear liquid, no label. Next to it, a note in elegant cursive, "For your headaches." A friend. She photographed everything before touching it, used a pencil to nudge the note aside. Underneath was another photo. This one was newer, taken with a long lens. Riley herself, entering her apartment building. The timestamp was from last night. The liquid in the vial could have been anything. Water. Acid. Or something far more sinister. She sealed it in an evidence bag she still kept in her desk. Old habits die hard and locked it in her filing cabinet. By the time her first period students arrived, she'd made a decision. If Hunter wanted to play games, she'd show him how federal agents played, but she'd need allies, and in a place like Ridgemont. Allies were harder to find than honest politicians. That's when she noticed Coach Kowalski watching her from across the courtyard. And something in his expression suggested he knew more than his affable gym teacher persona let on. But that realization it would have to wait, because Madison Chen had just walked in, and the fear in her eyes wasn't about chemistry grades. "Miss C," Madison whispered, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "I need to tell you something. About Hunter. About what he's really doing." And that's when Riley understood that the game had already begun, and she was 3 moves behind. The next few days passed in a blur of careful normalcy. Riley taught her classes, graded papers, attended faculty meetings where everyone pretended the school's biggest donor's son wasn't running a criminal enterprise from his locker. But underneath the routine, she was building her case. Madison's revelation had been both more and less than she'd expected. The girl knew about the drugs half the senior class did, apparently. Study Buddy, they called it. A designer stimulant that made Adderall look like caffeine. Kept you awake for days. Enhanced memory retention by 400%. And best of all, didn't show up on standard drug tests. "Everyone uses it," Madison had whispered, tears streaming down her face. "For SATs, AP exams, college applications. Parents don't ask how their C student suddenly gets into Harvard. They just write the check." "Why are you telling me this?" Madison had looked away. "My little brother, freshman. Hunter's been pushing him to try it. Says it's totally safe. Everyone's doing it. But I've seen what happens when you try to stop. Zoe's been trying to quit for weeks. She's..." Madison's voice broke. "She's not okay, Miss C. None of us are okay." That evening, Riley had stayed late again, officially to prep for the next day's labs. Actually, to do something she'd sworn she'd never do again, build a case. She'd started with public records. Hunter's father, Milton Sinclair, owned Sin Farm Industries. On paper, they manufactured generic medications for third-world countries. Humanitarian work. Tax breaks galore. But dig deeper. Follow the shell companies and offshore accounts. And a different picture emerged. The knock on her classroom door made her jump. Coach Kowalski stood in the doorway, still in his Ridgemont wrestling windbreaker. "Working late again, Caldwell." Just trying to stay ahead of the curriculum. He entered uninvited, closed the door behind him. Up close, she could see the scar tissue around his knuckles, the way he carried his weight on the balls of his feet. Fighter's stance, even at rest. "You know, I did 20 years in the teams," he said conversationally. "Mostly Afghanistan, some Iraq. Thought I'd seen the worst humanity had to offer." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Then I came to teach at a prep school." Riley waited. In interrogation, silence was often more effective than questions. "Hunter Sinclair's been poisoning kids for 2 years. Kowalski continued. "Faculty knows, administration knows, board knows, But 60 million in donations buys a lot of blind eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the first teacher in 5 years who's actually trying to do something about it. Also, he pulled out his phone, showed her a badge on the screen. Detective Ruiz asked me to make contact. The DEA shield gleamed gold even in the photo. Riley felt something in her chest unclench slightly. She wasn't alone. Ruiz has been building a case for 18 months, Kowalski explained. But Hunter's smart. Never handles product directly. Uses burner phones. Pays in crypto. We need someone on the inside. Someone with the skills to gather evidence that'll stick. I'm just a chemistry teacher. Right. A chemistry teacher who spent 7 years with the FBI's forensic unit, who testified in 38 federal cases with a 100% conviction rate, who walked away from it all because he stopped. Sorry, that's not my story to tell. Riley stared at the periodic table on her wall, each element in its place, everything ordered, logical, predictable, so unlike real life. What do you need me to do? Keep being you. Ask questions. Document everything. And when Hunter makes his move, because he will make a move, be ready. How do you know he'll move? Kowalski headed for the door, paused. Because his father's under federal investigation for money laundering. The family needs cash, fast. And Hunter's little chemistry project is their gold mine. He can't afford to have a curious teacher threatening his operation. After he left, Riley sat in the dark classroom, city lights painting long shadows across the lab benches. She thought about Sarah, about all the Sarahs out there, bright kids whose light got snuffed out by someone's greed. She'd failed her sister. But maybe, just maybe, she could save Madison's brother, save Zoe, save kids she didn't even know were drowning. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Final warning. Back off or learn what real chemistry looks like. This time. She didn't delete it. She forwarded it to the number Kowalski had given her. Then typed a response. Looking forward to the lesson. Because Riley Caldwell was done running. Done hiding. Done pretending that evil dressed in expensive clothes was any less evil than the kind that came with gun barrels and bad intentions. The next morning would change everything. But she didn't know that yet. All she knew was that somewhere in this school, kids were suffering, and she had the skills to do something about it. She locked up her classroom, checked the hallway empty, and headed for her car. The December air bit sharp and clean, and she breathed it in deep, tasting winter and possibility and the faint metallic tang that always preceded justice. Hunter Sinclair thought he was untouchable. He was about to learn that in chemistry, as in life. Every action had an equal and opposite reaction, and Riley Caldwell had always been very, very good at chemistry. The morning of December 19th arrived, wrapped in ice and bad intentions. Riley pulled into the faculty parking lot at 6:45, an hour before her usual time. The text that had woken her at 4 a.m. still glowed on her phone. Today you learn why teachers should stick to teaching. She'd forwarded it to Detective Ruiz. Gotten a response within minutes. Strike team in position. Get him to confess on tape. Stay safe. Stay safe. As if safety had ever been an option once she'd decided to stand between predators and children. The school felt different in the pre-dawn darkness. Hallways that usually echoed with teenage drama now held their breath, waiting. Riley unlocked her classroom, flipped on the lights, and immediately knew something was wrong. Every drawer in her desk had been pulled out, contents scattered. Her filing cabinet stood open, lock jimmied. But they hadn't found what they were looking for. The vial of clear liquid was safe in her apartment, already delivered to Ruiz's team for analysis. "Cowards," she muttered, starting to clean up the mess. Then she saw it. On her whiteboard, written in red marker, "Last chance. Quit, or the rest," was a chemical formula. C21H23NO5. She recognized it immediately. Heroin. Her hands weren't shaking as she photographed the board, weren't shaking as she emailed the image to Ruiz, weren't shaking as she calmly erased the threat and wrote out the day's lesson plan. Her hands had been steady when she'd identified the compounds that killed her sister. They'd be steady now. By 7:30, the school was filling with its usual morning chaos. Riley watched from her window as Hunter's matte black BMW pulled into the student lot. He emerged with his usual crew, plus a few she didn't recognize. Older, not students. "Going to be an interesting day." Coach Kowalski's voice came from her doorway. "You could say that." He entered, closed the door. "Ruiz wanted me to give you this." He handed her what looked like a regular whiteboard marker. "Panic button, click the cap 3 times. Cavalry comes running." "How many agents?" 12, plus Denver PD backup." He studied her face. "You sure about this? We could pull you out. Find another way." Riley thought about Zoe, shaking in her lab seat, about Madison's tears, about her sister. 23 forever. "I'm sure." First period came and went without incident. So did second. By third period, Riley was starting to think Hunter had reconsidered. Then Madison Chen appeared at her door during passing period, face pale. "Miss C, I can't find Zoe. She was supposed to meet me before school, but..." Riley's blood went cold. "When did you last see her?" "Yesterday afternoon. She said she was finally going to quit. Said she had evidence that could help you." "Oh God. You don't think..." "Madison, listen to me. Go to the main office. Tell them you're sick. Have your parents pick you up. Now." "But..." "Now, Madison." The girl fled. Riley pulled out her phone, started to dial Ruiz. When the fourth period bell rang, students filed in for AP Chemistry, their faces carefully neutral, too neutral. Hunter entered last, and he wasn't alone. 4 seniors flanked him, football players, from the look of them. None were in her class. "Gentlemen, I think you're in the wrong room." "No," Hunter said pleasantly, "they're exactly where they need to be." He walked to the door, turned the lock. The click echoed like a gunshot. "Hunter, unlock that door. Now." "Or what?" He moved toward her desk, his crew spreading out to block the exits. "You'll call security. Brady's taking a sick day. Sudden stomach bug. Food poisoning's terrible this time of year." The other students sat frozen, some pulling out phones only to put them away at Hunter's look. "See, Miss Caldwell, you've been laboring under a misconception." Hunter perched on a lab table, casual as a catalog model. "You think this is a school. It's not. It's a business, and you've been disrupting operations. If you're referring to your drug, study aids," he corrected. "Performance enhancers. No different than coffee or energy drinks, really. Just more effective. Tell that to the kids in the hospital." His smile flickered. "What kids? The 3 seniors from Jefferson High who OD'd last week on pills traced back to Ridgemont. Or did you think crossing district lines would protect you? You're lying." "Am I?" Riley pulled out her phone, showed him the Denver Post article. "Fentanyl contamination. Hunter, your cook got sloppy. Or greedy. Cut the product with something cheaper." For the first time since she'd met him, Hunter Sinclair looked genuinely shaken. That's impossible. They don't use fentanyl. Riley pressed. Which is it? Hunter! He stood abruptly. You know what doesn't matter. Because, after today, you won't be anyone's problem. That's when she noticed what Mason Whitmore was holding. Her personnel file, thick with documentation. Let's see. Hunter opened it, began reading. Multiple psych evaluations following sister's death. Prescription for Xanax. Prescription for Ambien. History of obsessive behavior regarding student welfare. He looked up. That's from your previous principal. By the way, seems you have a pattern of getting too involved. Those are were confidential, past tense. He pulled out his phone. Amazing what a good lawyer can get unsealed, or what a bad lawyer will leak for the right price. She understood then. This wasn't just about the drugs. This was about complete destruction. Professional, personal, total. But that's not the best part, Hunter continued. See, we found your little evidence stash. The vial, the one you thought was so clever to hide. He produced an identical vial from his pocket. Liquid LSD. Enough to dose half the school. That's not yours, prove it. He turned to the class. How many of you saw Miss Caldwell acting strangely paranoid, staying late, going through files? A few hands raised reluctantly. And how many noticed her paying special attention to certain students, asking personal questions? More hands. Riley felt the trap closing. Every action she'd taken to protect them was being twisted into predation. Still, Hunter mused, accusations need evidence, and evidence can be so subjective. Unless, he nodded to his crew. They moved fast, faster than she'd expected. Two grabbed her arms while Mason produced a pair of scissors. Don't, she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. Whatever you're thinking. Oh, I'm done thinking. Hunter took the scissors. You wanted to play heroes need costumes. Let's see what's under yours. The blade flashed. Her button-down shirt. The professional armor she wore every day. Parted down the front. Buttons scattered across the floor like dropped pills. The room erupted. Some students screamed. Others raised phones. Recording. Someone yelled for help. But the locked door held firm. Riley stood there, shirt hanging open, refusing to show fear. She'd been in worse situations, faced actual killers. These were just children playing with matches. Then she laughed. It started low, almost a chuckle, then built into something genuine and deeply unsettling. Hunter stepped back, scissors lowering. What's so funny? You. She gasped between laughs. All of you. So convinced you're untouchable. So certain daddy's money makes you gods. She straightened, shrugged off the ruined shirt entirely, standing in her sports bra like an MMA fighter, entering the ring. You want to play rough? Let's play. She moved before anyone could react. 3 years of FBI combat training, plus the Krav Maga she'd taken up after Sarah's death. Hunter's crew might have had size, but she had purpose. The first football player went down with a knee to the solar plexus. The second caught an elbow to the temple. By the time Hunter realized his mistake, she had him by the collar. My turn, she said, and ripped. His $200 shirt tore like tissue paper. But it wasn't the shirt that made everyone gasp. It was what lay beneath. A burn scar in the shape of a Z covered his left shoulder. But as the class watched, the scar began to run. Dark rivulets streaming down his chest. Silver nitrate, Riley announced calmly. Reacts with skin to create temporary marks, completely harmless. Washes off with soap. But photographs beautifully. She smiled. You're not the only one who can play with evidence, Hunter. You crazy bitch, probably. She released him, stepped back. But here's the thing about crazy bitches. We keep records. She moved to her desk, pulled out a thick folder from underneath the one place they hadn't searched. Copies of every stolen chemical, every forged signature, every Bitcoin transaction you thought was untraceable. She fanned out the papers. Turns out your girlfriend Chloe isn't as loyal as you thought. Amazing what people will share when they're scared for their future. Chloe Vandenberg's face went white. Hunter, I didn't. She wore a wire for 3 weeks. Riley continued. Got you discussing prices, territories, even your father's involvement, all legally recorded with a warrant. That's when they heard the sirens. Not distant, right outside. You called the cops. Hunter lunged for the door, forgetting it was locked from the inside. His own trap, turned against him. I didn't have to. Riley held up the marker Kowalski had given her. Panic button, triggered the moment you locked us in. Every word, every threat, every admission. Broadcast directly to the DEA surveillance van. She clicked the cap 3 times. Like this. The door exploded inward, not kicked, blown off its hinges by a battering ram. Tactical officers flooded in, weapons drawn, screaming commands. Hunter tried to run, made it 3 steps before being tackled. His crew didn't even try to resist. Within 90 seconds, the classroom looked like a scene from a police procedural. Detective Ruiz entered last, badge hanging from her neck, satisfaction written across her weathered face. Riley Caldwell, you okay? 5 by 5, detective. Got everything, Riley gestured to the chaos. Gift wrapped with a bow. As they led Hunter past her, he stopped, officers holding his cuffed arms. This isn't over. My father is being arrested as we speak. Ruiz interrupted. Federal agents are raiding Sin Farm facilities in 6 states. Turns out, the IRS really doesn't like it when you launder drug money through charitable donations. They dragged him away. But not before Riley saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. The kind that comes from realizing Daddy's money can't fix everything. The classroom slowly emptied. Crime scene techs arrived to process evidence. Students were escorted to the auditorium for statements and counseling. Through it all, Riley stood by the window, wearing a borrowed Ridgemont wrestling jacket, watching winter clouds gather over the mountains. Hell of a thing, Kowalski said, joining her. You okay? I will be. For what it's worth, Zoe's safe. We picked her up this morning, got her into protective custody. She's the one who gave us the final pieces, Hunter's whole distribution network. Relief flooded through her. Is she detoxing? It'll be rough, but she'll make it. Kid's strong, like her teacher. Riley touched the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. I couldn't save my sister. No, but you saved Zoe, and Madison's brother, and kids you'll never even know about. He paused. Sarah would be proud. Maybe, maybe not, but for the first time in 2 years, Riley thought she might be able to live with herself. Principal Green appeared in the doorway, face grave. Ms. Caldwell, we need to discuss my resignation. She turned, pulled the letter from her bag, already typed, effective immediately. What? No! I was going to say we need to discuss your commendation. The board's calling an emergency meeting. After what you've done, what I've done is my job. Protect kids, teach chemistry, in that order. She handed him the letter. But I can't do it here. Not anymore. This place? It's broken at levels I can't fix. Where will you go? Riley smiled. The first genuine smile she'd worn in months. There's a public school in Aurora. Title I. They need a chemistry teacher. Someone who understands that not every kid gets a second chance. She gathered her few remaining belongings, took one last look at the periodic table on the wall. All those elements, each in its proper place. But the real chemistry, the kind that mattered, happened between people. Reactions of trust and betrayal, courage and fear, justice, mercy. Hunter Sinclair had learned that lesson the hard way. He'd thought chemistry was just about formulas and reactions. He'd forgotten the first rule of science: every action has consequences. Riley walked out of Ridgemont Academy for the last time. Snow beginning to fall on the manicured grounds. Behind her, parents were arriving in luxury SUVs, demanding explanations, threatening lawsuits. Ahead of her, somewhere in Aurora, kids who'd never had a chance were waiting for someone to believe in them. She'd failed her sister, but maybe, just maybe, she could save someone else's. And in the end, that's all any of us can do. Take our scars, our failures, our hard-won knowledge, and try to light a path for those coming behind us. Chemistry, after all, is just the study of change. And Riley Caldwell was finally ready to stop running from hers. 6 months later, the headlines had faded. Hunter Sinclair, sentenced to 15 years federal. Milton Sinclair, 25 to life. Sin Farm Industries, dissolved. Ridgemont Academy, under new leadership. Mandatory drug testing. Actual consequences. But in a modest classroom in Aurora, where the periodic table was held up with duct tape and hope. Ms. Caldwell taught 32 kids who'd been written off by everyone else. "Who can tell me why silver nitrate turns skin black?" she asked. A dozen hands shot up. Kids who'd never raised their hands before. Kids who were learning that chemistry wasn't just about elements and compounds. It was about transformation, about taking base metals and making gold, about taking broken things and making them whole. "It's a reduction reaction," Maria Gonzalez said. "The silver ions gain electrons and become metallic silver." Excellent. And what does that teach us? Another student, Deshaun Williams, grinned that sometimes things have to break down before they can become something better. Riley smiled. "A plus, Mr. Williams, a plus." Because that was the real lesson, not the chemistry of drugs or detection, but the chemistry of redemption, the formula for turning pain into purpose. And in a classroom where hope was the most volatile element, Riley Caldwell had finally found her equilibrium. The last thing she did each day was look at the photo on her desk. Not Sarah, that wound had scarred over, would always ache, but no longer bled. This was a new photo. Zoe Nguyen at her high school graduation. Clean for 6 months. Headed to college on a full scholarship. The inscription on the back. In Zoe's careful handwriting, "Thank you for showing me that the strongest reactions happen when someone believes in you." Chemistry. Indeed. And in the end. That's all that mattered. Not the headlines or the heroics. Just one teacher, one student, one moment of choosing to stand up instead of stand by. Because sometimes The most powerful chemistry happens not in labs or formulas, but in the simple act of refusing to let the darkness win. Riley Caldwell had learned that lesson the hard way. Now she taught it the only way that mattered. One student at a time. The courtroom was packed the day Riley testified. Hunter Sinclair, in his orange jumpsuit, looked nothing like the untouchable prince he'd once been, as she detailed the chemical compositions, the distribution network, the lives destroyed. She felt Sarah's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. "One last question, Ms. Caldwell," the prosecutor said. "Why did you laugh when they attacked you?" Riley looked directly at Hunter. "Because I knew something they didn't. Chemistry taught me that pressure creates diamonds, and they just applied enough pressure to transform me from a teacher into something much harder." Hunter was led away in chains. 20 years, no parole. Outside the courthouse, Zoe Nguyen waited with her parents. The girl who'd once shaken from withdrawal now stood tall, medical school acceptance letter in her pocket. "I'm going to be a doctor," Zoe said. "Addiction specialist. Because of you." "No," Riley corrected gently. "Because of you. I just reminded you of your own strength." That evening, Riley visited Sarah's grave for the first time since the funeral. She placed a single white lily on the stone, next to a printout of the verdict. "I couldn't save you," she whispered, "but I saved others. I hope that's enough." The wind stirred the trees, and for just a moment, she could swear she smelled her sister's vanilla perfume. Back in her Aurora classroom Monday morning, 32 teenagers waited to learn about covalent bonds. But first, Riley wrote on the board, "Every element has the potential for transformation." "Today," she announced, "we're going to learn how pressure and heat turn carbon into diamonds. And maybe, just maybe, we'll discover that the same principle applies to people." The students leaned forward, ready to learn, and Riley Caldwell, no longer running from her ghosts, taught them how to shine.